In this demo, I'm going to get the project set up to use UI Router, and we'll get the primary routes configured. Before I do that, I want to show you how the app works right now. There is no routing configured at all. I've removed all of the ng route code from the previous module of this course. We're starting with the same shell we did in that last module. To start the Node web server that will serve the app and the data, I'm going to open the terminal in WebStorm and type node space server.js. You can see here that the server is now running on port 3000. I'll now jump over to a browser and go to that address. Because there is no client-side routing configured yet, we don't see anything except the navigation bar at the top. If I click on the links, you can see that the address bar changes, but we still don't get anything new on the page. Let's go start to fix that. The first thing I need to do is install UI Router. In the slides, I mentioned several ways you can do that. I'm going to use Bower here. I'll open a new terminal window in WebStorm and change to the app folder. I can then just type Bower install Angular UI Router. You can see that it installed version 0.2.15. I now need to add a reference to the JavaScript file containing the code. I'll open index.html and just add a new script tag to the Angular section that references the file we just downloaded. It got installed in the app Bower Components Angular UI Router release directory, and the file name is angularUIRouter.min.js. While I've got this file open, I'll go ahead and add a place for UI Router to insert the views for the app. To do that, I'm just going to add a new div with the UI view directive on it. Remember that you use ngView with ngRoute, but to make it work with the UI Router, you use the UI view directive. Now we're ready to begin configuring states, so I'll open the app.js file. The UI Router functionality is contained in a module named UI.Router, so we need to specify that as a dependency for our apps module. I'll add it inside the square brackets in our module's setter function. We'll configure states inside our module's config function, and states are configured using the state provider, so we need to inject that into the function. I'll add our first state by calling the state function on the state provider. The first parameter to the function is the name of the state. I'll call this one home. The second parameter is the state configuration object that contains all of the details about the state. The first property I'll add to it is the URL property, and I'll set it to a / since this will be the home state of the application. I'll then use the template property to define the view for the state. I'm going to add a very simple bit of HTML just so we can easily test that it works. Just to verify our very basic state is now working, I'll go back to the browser and refresh the app. We do see the very simple view I created, so it's working fine so far. One point to note here is that the home state was activated because we navigated to a URL that matched the URL defined on the state. As we'll see shortly, one of the nice benefits of using UI Router is that you can also navigate to a state just using the name of the state. But I think it's good to point out that it will still match on a URL if you have them defined on your states. Let's go back to the code and make this a bit more interesting. Using the template property on a state is fine for something as simple as this basic message, but most of the time you're going to have a more complex view to display and you'll want to keep it in a separate file. So I'm going to change the home state to use the template URL property instead and point it to a file named home.html in the project's templates folder. I also have a home controller I want this state to use, so I'll specify that with the controller property. I like using Angular's controller as syntax, and I could specify that on the same line by just adding as home on the end. However, I prefer to accomplish the same thing using the controller as property that's available in the configuration object. Okay, with those pieces in place, let's go back to the browser and refresh the app again. It now looks much better. The home controller is retrieving some data from the server, and the view stored in the home.html file is presenting it to us. I now want to add states with all of the same properties for each of the links in the navigation bar at the top of the page. I'm going to use a code snippet to paste that in. Okay, you can see that these are all very similar. I've added states named schools, classrooms, and activities. Each one has its own URL, controller, and view template. I'll go refresh the app again. Now when I click each of the navigation links, we can see that everything is working as expected. Now that we have the basics in place, let's go talk about how to activate states and use the state service.